I now call to order the Society's 2,391st meeting in the 148th year since its founding in 1871. Good evening, everyone. My name is Larry Milstein, as many of you seem to know. I am the president of PSW, one of the oldest scientific societies of Washington, D.C., committed to providing a forum to further scientific understanding and inquiry. Welcome to our members and guests to tonight's lecture by Don Norman in the John Wesley Powell Auditorium of the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C., including our members and friends around the world who are watching the live stream of tonight's meeting on well, actually, it's not on PSW's Science's YouTube channel because YouTube took our channel down for some reason. But it is being live streamed to the location that we sent out to all our members. And we'll begin with a few announcements, a reading of the minutes of the 2,390th meeting, and Andy Knowles' lecture on Earth's earliest life, and then turn to this evening's lecture, followed by a question and answer period. Thereafter, I will present a small gift to our speaker to thank him for coming here, make a few closing announcements, and then adjourn the meeting to the social hour. Please join me in thanking the sponsors of the Fall 2017 and Spring 2018 lecture series, the Policy Studies Organization in cooperation with the American Public University, and a generous sponsor who has asked to remain anonymous. I am pleased to announce that the following new members have been elected to the Society. Judith Atkinson, a nurse attorney with Corvell Corporation, interested in medicine, forensic science, and astronomy, who comes to PSW through a friend who is a member. And tonight's speaker, Don Norman, whose interests will be clear in part from tonight's lecture. Please join me in welcoming them to the Society. If Judith or Don is here, are here, I invite them to pick up a signed reprint of Volume 1 of the PSW Bulletin, and if there are any other new members who have recently been announced and you did not get your signed volume, I will be happy to give you your signed volume, or you can take it unsigned if you want. James Heelan will now read the minutes of Andy Knowles' lecture at the 2,390th meeting. James.
Thanks, Larry. On March 23rd, 2018, President Larry Milstein called the 2,390th meeting of the Society to order at 8:05 p.m. in the John Wesley Powell Auditorium of the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C. He announced the order of business, that the evening's lecture would be live streamed on the internet, and welcomed new members to the Society. The minutes of the previous meeting and the lecture by Thomas Zurbuchen were approved without correction. President Milstein then introduced the speaker for the evening, Andrew Knoll, Fisher Professor of Natural History and Professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Harvard University. His lecture was titled, Earth's Earliest Life Written in Stone, Reconstructing Earth Life's Deep History and What It Suggests About Life Elsewhere in the Universe. Knoll began by stating that the present is not a representative moment of life on Earth, but rather an end memo. Scientists know this because Earth records its history in rocks. Scientists have examined modern Earth life and inferred a common microbial ancestry. Knoll said this deep microbial history is captured in Earth's fossil record. For example, a large sedimentary rock formation in Spitsbergen, Norway, includes wavy laminations that Knoll said were created by sediment deposits trapped by ancient microbial mats. Knoll said that 750 to 800 million year old cyanobacteria, encased in diagenic chert nodules preserved in the formation, confirmed the ancient microbial mat theory. In fact, Hawaii is home to comparable modern formations. In northwestern Australia, there is a group of 3.5 billion year old sedimentary rocks that outcrop at the surface. While molecular markers are unavailable in these rocks, scientists have found biogeochemical signatures in them, strongly suggesting there was a working biological carbon cycle when the rocks formed. The rocks also include laminations like those found in Spitsbergen and preserved organic microspheres. But, Knowles said, oxygen gas has only been physiologically important to the atmosphere and surface oceans for 2.4 billion years. To reach this conclusion, Knowles addressed banded iron formations, the source of most modern industrial iron. Banded iron cannot, in principle, form in today's oceans because to form, iron must be able to move in solution through seawater, which cannot happen when oxygen is present. Incidentally, banded iron formations are prevalent on Earth in the geological record up until approximately 2.4 billion years ago, when it almost entirely stops. Taken together, Knowles said, the available evidence suggests life originated early in Earth history, but that it did so in the absence of oxygen. In other words, early life on Earth developed as though on an alien planet. Knowles said we can make use of this understanding to approach the examination of life on other worlds. He then turned to the rover Opportunity, which NASA landed on Mars in 2004. Opportunity is in a flat plane with strong hematite signatures suggestive of once flowing water. Opportunity's observation of rippled sedimentary rocks, dissolved salts, and flow patterns corroborate the flowing water hypothesis. The rover also observed deposits of jarosite, which is formed under oxidizing and acidic conditions. An Earth analog for this type of environment is Rio Tinto, Spain, in which there is abundance of fossilized life. However, Knowles said that the one-time existence of water does not mean Mars once had a life-friendly environment. Opportunity observed a pattern of salt deposits that indicate the water evaporated to the point that no Earth-like life could tolerate and never returned. Knowles concluded, while farther away than Mars, he believes we will find carbon-based life on other planets. President Milstein invited questions from the audience. A guest asked whether any bodies in our solar system have potential for life. Knowles said that while improbable, the geysers on Enceladus and the oceans of Titan could theoretically be home to microbial life. A member asked whether Knowles had considered viruses on other worlds. Knowles said the last 10 years of virus research have opened the door to such consideration, but he said it is unlikely to find viruses on planets without other life because, at least on Earth, viruses are completely dependent on cellular life. After the question and answer period, President Milstein thanked the speaker, made the usual housekeeping announcements, and invited guests to join the society. At 9:50 p.m., President Milstein adjourned the 2,390th meeting of the society to the social hour. Temperature, 6.5 C. Weather, clear. Attendance, 78. Respectfully submitted, James Heelan, Recording Secretary.
Thank you, James. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Any comments on the minutes? Do I have one back there? No. If not, I will accept a motion to adopt the minutes as read. Second from a member? Okay, all members in favor? Aye. All members opposed? Minutes are accepted as read and will be posted to the website in due course. And we now turn to tonight's lecture on democratizing design. And it's my pleasure to briefly introduce tonight's speaker, Don Norman. Don is director of the Design Lab at the University of California, San Diego. He is co-founder of the Nielsen Norman Group. He's an IDEO fellow and formerly was vice president at Apple. He tells me that was between jobs. At UCSD, before becoming Design Lab director, Don served as chair of the psychology department, as founder and chair of the cognitive science department. He also was the Breed Professor of Design at Northwestern University and has been distinguished visiting professor of industrial design at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. He is an author on numerous scholarly publications and is particularly well known for his 18 books translated into 23 languages, perhaps most especially The Design of Everyday Things, Emotional Design, and Living with Complexity. Among many honors and awards, he received the Franklin Institute's Benjamin Franklin Medal in Computer Science in computer and cognitive science, and honorary degrees from the University of Padua, the Technical University of Delft, and the University of the Republic of San Marino. He is a member of the American National Academy of Engineering, and he is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, among other organizations. Please hold questions for the question and answer period at the end of the lecture, and join me in welcoming Don to the podium.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. I pity the secretary who has to summarize my talk. And at dinner, I was sitting across from a friend of mine, Chris, who works, he's a physician, but he works for the FCC. And actually, my group in the design lab at San Diego is engaged with him at a very large project. It's together with the National Cancer Institute, the FCC. Our section is being paid for in part by Amgen, a pharmaceutical company. Humana is part of it. It's a huge project. And it's done in eastern Kentucky, where in eastern Kentucky in Appalachia, or as they say, Appalachia, it's the highest rate of deaths in cancer and heart disease. And the problems are very simple. If you go and look at the people, there's very little employment, low education, low socioeconomic status, not much money, and so they drink a lot, they smoke a lot, they eat fast food a lot, they don't get much exercise, they're overweight, and the result is heart rate and cancer. Now notice this is not really a medical problem. It's a behavioral problem, a social problem, an economic problem, a political problem. How do you address problems like that? That's the sort of thing that we do in the design lab. We are interested in looking at the complex sociotechnical problems. We think of them as systems because there's no single answer, there's no single cause. It's a very complex medley of issues, but they are some of the most important problems facing the Earth, not just the United States. In fact, we have a program that we are just starting to develop, which we call the Earth Design Institute, because we actually wanted to look at the problems facing the Earth, and they're economic, they are behavioral, they are lack of food, lack of shelter, huge disease, infectious diseases, lots and lots and lots of problems. No problem like this can be solved, but we can make a difference. But how do we make a difference? There are 7 billion people on this planet. There are not enough professionals to go around. Well, there are people. Let's harness the people. So the topic for tonight is called Democratizing Design. And actually, you will see that, to me, design is much more than design. And I'll tell you the story. But I want to give you a brief introduction first. So we're a new place. We just started. We are, this is the 4th year of operation. I was taken out of retirement to head it. Actually, I've retired twice. So I was living comfortably in Palo Alto, very busy, traveling around the world. I'm on lots of company boards and advisory boards. And I didn't want a job, and I didn't need a job. But the chancellor came to my home, came from San Diego to my home in Palo Alto, and convinced me to go back because this was a great opportunity to do something big and important. In fact, Chris and I were discussing that, and Chris said that he is tired as a physician of solving little problems. What he wants to do is look at the major problems and attack them, and that's exactly how I feel. So what is design? For many people, design is, well, making something look pretty. Well, yeah, that's part of design. Well, it's also making something that's usable and understandable and fits human needs and human understanding and capability. Yeah, that's the part of design that I actually champion the most. But to me, design is more than that. Design is a series of activities to change the world. We are a practice. And that means that we go out and we actually try to make a difference in the world, as opposed to an academic discipline. And I've been in several. I'm actually a member of the psychology department, the cognitive science department, and the electrical engineering department. There you're trying to find out basically how the world works, the truth, what is really going on, the basis of science. But we want to apply it. So actually we don't need truth. We need good enough. We need a good understanding. We need to be able to go out in the world and solve issues, and we can't wait for the science to come with a complete answer. But worse than that, if you ask scientists what they know about any topic, they will tell you how, oh, we don't know. They will tell you how little they know. And they will often argue with each other over points. But actually, that's the way science makes advances, by disagreements. It's an adversarial system. But if you actually step back a couple thousand feet and listen to their arguments, they really agree about all the major issues. So what we do is take those agreements and work with them. Let me tell you what I mean when I say I don't need truth. If I tell you it is, 17 degrees Celsius, and ask you what temperature is it Fahrenheit, some of you know the equation. And there's probably no way that most of you could solve that in your head. So let me tell you, 17 times 2 is 34, plus 30 is 64, 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Multiply by 2 and add 30. Is that the correct equation? No. Is 74 the correct answer? No. But it's a degree or so. It's pretty close. And why do you want to know? Well, should I wear a sweater or a jacket? So you don't care if I'm accurate to 1/10 of a degree. That's good enough. And that's what we do for applications. Okay? But in order to apply, we cannot be specialists. So the design lab at UC San Diego is not in a department or a division. We are sort of standing isolated. We don't report to anybody because we work with faculty from the business school, from 4 different departments in the engineering school, from 3 different departments in the social sciences, from 5 different departments in the medical school, and with the School of Global Policy and Strategy. We cut across the campus as needed for whatever the problem is. So let me give you some examples of problems that we've been looking at. San Diego has a major transportation problem, and most cities do, actually. If you look, even with a good public transportation system, and California is not noted for that, but even if there was a good one, it doesn't go every place. And quite often it can be a mile away from where people live, and it's usually the people in the lower economic parts of the city where the transportation is the least. And if you're doing shopping a lot, or if you're older and you're frail and you're shopping, how do you get from the stop to your home carrying groceries? Or if you need a wheelchair or have trouble walking. And there's a major problem in San Diego, and how do we solve them? Well, as I said, there are lots of people and lots of problems and not that many experts. And using experts is the wrong way to solve a problem anyway. We have an elitist system today in everything, in commerce, but let me just talk about in design. We go out, designers, and we say, we're going to do ethnography, and we're going to come and look at you and study you and figure out what your real issues are. And then we're going to go back and we're going to do really wonderful creative work and figure out the solutions to your issues. And then my marketing department will convince you that you want the solutions that I've invented for the needs that you didn't even know you had. Think about your smartphone and the way it gets changed every year. More and more and more features. Do you really need those? The marketing convinces you do. But what happens if I go to Appalachia and try to tell the people, here's what you must do to change your behavior? Well, they could listen to me? No. They would listen to themselves. So why can't they themselves figure out what their issues are and figure out what to do with it? And what we can do is we can be the catalyst that makes this happen. And this is what we're doing in downtown San Diego. What we did is we got the mayor and we got the chancellor of the university to put together a team, which includes us. And we have gone down to this part of the it's southeastern part of San Diego and found the citizens who live there and talked to them and listened to them. And they are the ones who suggested that they had bad transportation problems. So we said, why not solve them? And what we've tried to do is engage them and help them to figure out what those answers are. And we're still working on it. It's going to take a while. We only did this for 1 year now. But we also engaged a whole bunch of students, a number of them who were living in that area, to themselves also work on this problem. So do you just need to know when the bus is coming? Well, maybe your students can build something that can help you do that. Or do you need transportation for that last mile? Maybe there are services we can invent. Maybe even simple bicycles. What can we do? What can you do to help yourself? And what we do is stand back and act as a catalyst and act as sort of the incentives. And we help inspire them. Now, can we do that around the world? Well, in Phoenix, Arizona, one of our new faculty who came from Arizona State University had done this with their transportation system. And there were lots of problems the people had. And everybody wanted a solution, and the city was going to give them solutions, but everybody argued and fought about, well, it's more important to have buses, or no, we want more bicycles, and no, the cars are having trouble, look how crowded they are, we need wider streets and more streets. And everybody had an opinion, and as you may have gone to public affairs, it's really hard when everybody's fighting for their ideas. But part of our philosophy is quite often when people are really fighting and disagreeing, they may actually all be correct, but they look at it with a different point of view, and their points of view have to be respected. And so what Eric, who was the person in charge, figured out to do was a way of letting them try to visualize the disagreements and the points of view. And he did this by making a great big, we use advanced technology. And the technology was a big piece of cardboard. And he took all of the ideas, better bus service, wider streets, more bicycle lanes, et cetera, and he put them on a little rectangle. And the size of the rectangle was proportional to the cost. And their job was to put these rectangles into this big piece of cardboard. And they had to fit because they couldn't overlap, because that was the big piece of cardboard was the size of the amount of money that was available. And so they began to realize the kind of trade-offs you make. That, sure, we can put in these wonderful bus services, but that's rather expensive, so that eats up a lot of the space and gives you less space for pedestrian bridges or walkways or bicycles or whatever. And by doing this, eventually they actually reached a sensible compromise that is now actually being implemented. They actually got a bond issue, and they are now building it. But again, let them solve their own problems. They're much happier. If we would have gone in and given them that very same solution, they would not have trusted us. So to democratize things, we have to actually democratize it. That means it has to be not just for the people, but by the people. So how else can we do this? Well, I've told you about the project we call Design for San Diego, and this was a project in Phoenix. Another one is, diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a horrible disease to have. Some of you might have it. And you have to continually be measuring your blood sugar level and determining what you might eat, or whether you need a shot of insulin or how much insulin. And when you go to sleep at night, you have to plan that well, because you don't want to have your blood sugar level drop too low in the middle of the night or go up too high. So you have to balance the amount of sugar you're taking and the amount of insulin you're taking. And it's traditionally been done by pricking the finger and getting a little blood sample and testing the blood to get the blood sugar level. Well, today there are devices that automatically do that. It's called a continuous glucose monitor, GCM. And there's one made by Dexcom, which is conveniently for us, a San Diego company. It's a small thing about the size of a deck of cards, and you strap it to the body, but there's a little tiny little probe that you just stick under the skin. It's easy to do. Doesn't hurt. It's very small and thin, and you just poke it in, and it lasts about a week. And it measures your blood glucose level every 5 minutes, and puts it out on a readout. You carry in your pocket an electronic device that will tell you the reading, and it will alarm if it's too high or too low. Well, that's an advance. Well, the same is true with insulin pumps. There are several companies that make insulin pumps in the same way. You strap to the body and you put a little probe in, and you can take out its device and tell it how much insulin to give you. Well, there's a woman, and I'll call her Dana because that's her name. She actually does this publicly and speaks about it, so I'm not violating any confidentiality. She was having real trouble living with her diabetes. And so what she had finally done is she'd made up a list of rules on a piece of paper. She wrote them down about the activities she was intending to do in the next hour or two. I want to go running, therefore I should give myself an extra shot, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to have a big meal, so that she really understood, just given the rules, what she should do, but she still had to do it manually. And other parents said, well, that's really neat that the answer goes into this special device, but if my child who has diabetes goes to school, how can I monitor it? Why can't we get it onto the internet? So what happened was a bunch of people took the device apart, figured out how it worked, figured out what's called the APIs, which is sort of the guts inside for the programmers, and actually got the information onto a cell phone, which therefore put it onto the internet. So now you could follow your person's blood, you could follow your children's from any place. And they did the same with the insulin pump. And now, why can't we put those together? And so there's a group of the parents got together using the hashtag #WeCan'tWait and developed a system which today the website is called Night Scout, which is how you put these together. So they've invented and built this little device by themselves, which basically replaces the pancreas for this component of the pancreas. When the insulin level is too low, it tells the insulin pump to give you an injection. And it follows the rules that Dana had worked out. They programmed it in. So this was a real success because they couldn't get, no manufacturer had this. And the manufacturers can't do it because in order to produce a device like this, which could be life-threatening if you do it wrong, you had to prove to the FDA that this was legitimate and trustworthy. And these clinical trials can cost millions of dollars and millions of dollars. They can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of them could cost up to $1 billion. Take many years. They're very expensive and very difficult, and a lot of them are even wasted because it's not that you don't get good results, it's that the people drop out during the trial. And so you may have spent a lot of time and money and you get no result because people dropped out so much that your study is not worthwhile. So big companies actually liked what these people were doing because if you do it to yourself, the Federal Drug Administration does not control you. Anybody can do anything they want on themselves as long as no company was helping them, as long as there was no commercial interest. But what the companies did was study what was going on and watch and interact with them, not give them advice. In fact, they took one of the people who had done the early work and hired the person. And that was good for the company, but unfortunately, now that person could no longer help the group because the FDA would have said, ooh, you have to do a test. But what happened as a result, first of all, 200 or 300 people in the world have built these devices and their lives are much easier. And second of all, they learned so much that now the companies are starting to sell this commercially because they were able to speed up the trials because they knew a lot more about what to do. Now, let me take a look at the different examples I've given you. Design for San Diego was being designed by the people who lived there for themselves. In the Phoenix one, it was again, the people were doing it for themselves, but actually it was collaborative. We had the city administration, we had urban renewal experts, we had transportation experts, and we had the designers all helping facilitate the citizens in that area to help make these decisions. And if you look at the diabetes case, well, you couldn't let everybody do this because it took a lot of, first of all, you needed some really good medical knowledge and understanding of diabetes. And second of all, you needed really good technical skills. They were electronic and programming to be able to build these devices and program them and keep modifying them and checking. And so those are pretty advanced skills. And what they managed to do was bring them together to do this job. So if you look at any design, the design has many components. First of all, to us, it's a way of thinking and solving important problems, focusing upon the people who are involved. We do not focus on the technology, we focus on the people. We use whatever technology is relevant, like big pieces of cardboard, or the Raspberry Pi microprocessor. That's a pretty powerful computer, but that requires some expertise to program. And we solve those problems, and we think of them as a system, and we think, you know, we always, with these complex problems, we don't know the answers, so we try something cautiously if it's a medical device, and look at the results, and then modify and keep changing and keep changing. So, working on these problems, you have to think about who is this for, and who is it by? And the ideal case, it should be by and for people. We can't quite do that, though, because there are different kinds of skills required. There's a domain knowledge, and there's a technical skill, and the building skill, and so on. And the design process has actually many components, because I want to argue it's not just design. First of all, you have to understand what the issues are. Now, designers do that. We use basically a method that's borrowed from anthropology called ethnography, in which we try to go and observe and watch. But what we're trying to do now is, well, if people are solving it for themselves, we don't really have to do ethnography. Because after all, I've been living with diabetes for a lot of years. I know what the issues are. I don't need to study to see what the issues are, or transportation problems, or whatever the particular issue is. But there's that part, and then there's the design, which is thinking of what the solution might be. Then there's the implementation of that. Now, in order to do that, if I take the diabetes issue, these people had to learn a tremendous amount, so there's the learning part. So we must democratize learning as well, because it isn't just learning, you go to school and you learn. No, I got diabetes, I married somebody with diabetes, and now, which is true in this story, and now I have to really become an expert on diabetes because isn't it useful that I'm a programmer and that's exactly what she needs to solve this problem, but I don't want to solve it unless I truly understand the medical issues. So I have to learn all of the medical issues about the cause and treatment of diabetes. And there are two kinds of knowledge. There's the domain knowledge and the technical knowledge. So we have kind of a rough approximation, three kinds of people. We have domain experts, and we have technical experts, implementation experts. It could be in carpentry, but they're the local experts. And then we have everybody. And those three kinds of classes are the people who are required to build the thing, but those are the three classes we're building for as well. So it's really interesting if we take a look at what happens. So there's a tool that's called Arduino. Has anybody here have heard of Arduino? No, about 5% of the audience or so. So Arduino is the name of a bar in the city of Ivrea in Italy. And the bar is named after an old king of Italy. So Arduino is the name of the king, but the really important part is the name of the bar, because Ivrea was the housing of a design school that was set up there, because that used to be where this company, Olivetti, was housed. And so they used to go in and drink every night. And they realized that designers didn't have the right tools to build a lot of the important things that they were inventing. So the designers in the classes would invent these wonderful things, but then they didn't know how to build them and make them happen. So they said, oh, let's invent Arduino. They didn't quite do it that way, but they invented Arduino, which was a really inexpensive electronic board that had a computer on it and various types of other interconnection devices. You don't have to worry about it. And a simple computer language that designers who had no technical background whatsoever, they came from art schools, could learn that language and they could build all sorts of wonderful things. And they really can. They've done these tremendous, they're really dramatic things that I've seen them do at a very simple circuits. Well, so first of all, what we needed was a problem, but we needed the experts to be able to figure out that we can take these electronic components and some of these chips and put them together. And a different kind of expert says, oh, I can simplify the computer programming language to one that's good enough for what these people need, and put it all into a package, which they then distributed around the world. They started manufacturing them, selling them for cost, did not patent it, made it available to anybody who wanted to use it, open source, so we have a dissemination issue. So that's the other item we have to do. We have to democratize design, democratize learning, and democratize sharing the knowledge that we have so other people around the world could not only use it, but could improve it and change it over time. So these are the experts that produced this tool. Now this tool itself is really not of great value. It's what you do with the tool that matters, but you can't use the tool unless you have some learning. And so the experts had a lot of knowledge, but now we have the people who want to use it. They can't use it without learning how to program and learning some simple electronics and learning some what's called mechatronics, a combination of mechanical devices and electronic ones, and also sensors. If you want to make a medical device, you have a sensor that sensors something about the body and does a response. And so these people then were able to build devices and things that maybe then everyday people without any technical background could then make that and put together useful things to tell them when the next bus was coming. Seriously, that's one of the projects in Ivrea, little signal flags that said, hey, bus is coming in 10 minutes, better start cleaning up, get ready, 5 minutes, you better run. Very simple device, but it was very effective. So notice that many different skills are required, and skills to build the tools that make it easier for the next group to build the tools that make it easy for people to solve their own problems. Now, learning. Most of us think that we go to school to learn, and that's the world's worst place to learn. Learning, you don't learn by lectures. Here, my goal in the lecture is not to teach you some brand new deep concept, but to get you excited, get you to understand the philosophy and the spirit of what we are doing, and that's what lectures are good for. But to learn a lot of details, to learn the science, or to learn the mathematics, or the history, the philosophy, whatever you care about, you actually have to do it. You have to work on it. You have to do it, and you have to want to do it. One of the most important parts of learning is motivating. If you really want to learn something, you will struggle and you will learn. And actually struggling is very important, because struggling is how you learn. You struggle, you can't quite understand it, and then when you finally do, you got it. You really do understand it. And the way we teach in schools with lectures is the wrong way. I also think the way universities are organized is wrong, because they're organized around specialized disciplines. And as I said, if you want to build anything, you have to cut across all the disciplines. So I would love to change education. I would like to have it organized around problems. You get together all the people with the problem areas. You're going to learn the specialized disciplines when they apply to the problem. That motivates you. But you're actually doing something that's worthwhile. You know, people go into engineering school today because they want to build things. That's not what engineers do anymore. Engineering is applied mathematics. So you do a lot of mathematics, and you take all these courses, and at the end of the course, if you're lucky, the professor gives you an example of what you can do with it. And I say no. Give them the example on the first hour. Just like I started this talk, I gave you examples of what we do. and give them and tell them this is what they have to solve before they know anything. And most professors are horrified. How can they solve it if they don't know anything? And that's just the point. They can't. Because as they start to solve it, they will get stuck. And that's when they will really listen to the theory and the stuff that you teach them. So what we want to do is change education, but not just that way. It has to be for your entire life. Because I got diabetes or discovered it at a later age. And how do I solve it? How do I learn about it? How do I learn anytime? We call it just-in-time learning, JITL. So one of the things we're doing in the design lab, we have a huge program on mass education. How can we teach? We actually teach like 100,000 people in a class. But how do we do that with individual attention? That's what we're working on. And lots of the things you need to know, you don't need to take a course for 10 weeks or 15 weeks. That's what the academics do. But knowledge doesn't come in 10 or 15-week segments. Some of it's a half hour, some of it's 2 years. For those of you who do finance, you know about present value and net present value. That's sort of the fundamental of finance. Well, I could teach that to you in a half hour or less. So why not have those things available? And you know what? People are doing that. What's the world's best educational institution? It's called YouTube. Almost anything you want, you can find a video on it. You want to learn how to cook pajeon, which is a wonderful Korean pancake. There are about 20 or 50 or 1,000 videos, I don't know. In fact, there are so many, that's the problem, there are too many. You want to learn how to do arithmetic or a calculus or a chemistry, there they are. The Khan Academy has lots and lots of modules. Each are about 5 minutes long. 5 minutes you can keep your attention on. And 5 minutes is short enough. If people can't understand that, they can redo it. It's not a big deal. If it were an hour-long or a 10-week-long course and people had trouble understanding, oh, that's a big deal to change. So we are working on MOOCs. We're working on trying to teach people things. We have another project, we call it Galileo, teaching people how to do science, which means you have to be able to do comparisons. If I really want to know, like, does eating cabbage bloat me? Or can I go to sleep if I had caffeine after 4 p.m.? How would people do the study on yourself? Well, we've taught them how to do that. We have a little guide that helps them, and they now are actually devising experiments just as well as professionals can devise them. Let's take the coffee one. How do you want to do it? You just make a deal with a coffee shop that you drink at all the time. And when you want some coffee, you go in there and say, hey, time for my coffee, and they'll give you coffee. But they won't tell you whether it's real coffee or decaffeinated coffee. So you don't know. And then what you do is you keep records of when you had coffee and whether you were able to sleep that night or not. And then later we go back and we get the records from the coffee shop about whether that night it was caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee. You can do that on yourself. It's a trial of an n equals 1. You don't need mass randomization because you can do it on yourself. So we teach people how to do that. So that's democratizing learning in the aid of actually trying to answer a real medical issue that may concern you. And actually some of the important medical issues dealing with the microbiome can be studied this way. In fact, one of the problems we're looking at in downtown San Diego is public health. We have some epidemic problems, and tuberculosis is coming back in, and we all know there are major drug problems. Tuberculosis is a behavioral issue, not so much a science issue. We understand tuberculosis. Some of you may think it's all gone and it's an old disease, but it's coming back. It's not very contagious. It's only contagious if somebody coughs or sneezes within a few feet of you. But suppose you're very poor and you're living in a crowded house, crowded room, crowded tenement, or suppose you need work, you can't stay away from work, and you take the bus and you sneeze and cough. How do we cure that? It's behavioral. It's not medical. A lot of these issues are, as I say, they're systems. They're behavioral, they're medical, they're economic, they're social, they're political. We're working on that. So, our project, this is only a small piece of this large project we want to do. But this small piece, as you see, is a big piece. It means changing the way we think of design by letting people do it themselves for themselves. And they're much more committed then, they're much more likely to follow it, they're much more likely to do the right things. And second, we have to democratize learning so that when you need something, you can learn it by yourself, or you can find somebody who can teach it to you. Some of the best teachers are people who just themselves have learned it and maybe struggled, and they know where they had trouble, so they can help you get over that trouble. And we have to do it when they need it, not when it's convenient for a school to teach it. But fortunately, some of the technologies, books are one of them, videos are another, internet's another one. But at San Diego, we have something called the Khan Academy Lite. The Khan Academy, I hope most of you know it, but if you don't know it, you should look at it. It's funded heavily by the Gates Foundation. But it started off because Khan, his nephews, always said, oh, I'm having trouble with arithmetic. And he got tired of trying to help them, decided to record some simple videos so that he wouldn't have to do it over and over again. And he put them up on the internet, and lo and behold, he soon had a lot of them, and then other people started helping him, and pretty soon it became a very powerful tool for remedial instruction, but then for basic instruction. But you needed the internet. So a group of people, in fact, cognitive science graduates, I'm happy to say, at San Diego said, well, gee, what if they don't have the internet? Why don't today memory is cheap. I can take the entire Khan Academy, it's only, 100 gigabytes or something, and put it on a hard drive, and I can send this off to Africa or India or wherever there is no internet, and they can have the very same experience themselves. So again, we're democratizing the education by spreading it out. And then we have to democratize the way we spread our knowledge. When we learn these ideas, can others benefit from it? And I'm happy to say that what I'm talking about, we're thinking of this large system of making it work, but every one of the components people around the world are already doing, which is wonderful because we can build on the work they've been doing. And one thing we want to do is bring together this community. So there are people in Portugal, for example, that have a website called Patient Innovation, where people can say, oh, I built something for my grandmother and her memory loss. Or I built a little crutch that was easy to fold up and keep out of the way, but still could be used as a crutch when I need to walk. Or, and they share these. And there's a group, well, there's a person at MIT, Eric von Hippel, who's a professor in the business school, who's been doing this for quite a while. And in fact, he came and spent the entire month of January with us, helping us develop and work on some of our ideas. And there's a group in China, and there are groups all over. And we want to help bring them together, but we need some hubs, some ways of having some common standards. Because unless you have standards so that the components that people make fit together neatly, it's not going to work. So we're going to have to develop some standards for knowledge modules and electronic modules, and for that matter, paper modules. And a lot of what we do doesn't require building anything. Because if you look at tuberculosis, it's about understanding the issues, and it's about teaching people the right behaviors. The same with smoking, the same with cancer, the same with drinking. Some of that's really hard to do. But the best, most powerful ways of doing public health is really through ideas and messages. We really caused a huge drop in smoking, and most of it was by the messaging that we did. We didn't give people medicine to stop them from smoking. It took a long time, it took decades, but we can do that with other types of problems, of medical issues, and especially a lot of the contagious drugs that we are getting. So that's what we want to do. Our job is very simple. We want to change the world. Thank you. And I deliberately left some time for discussion, because to me, the best parts of these talks are the discussions. Larry?
So we do indeed have time for some questions, and there's a little procedure. We have the questioner, we have some people running around with microphones. Microphone. Microphone on. It's on now. Remember to put mine.
I am an expert in technology. I was a vice president of advanced technology
told
at
me
Apple.
that-
I can break any technology, and that's what seems to be happening here.
All right, so there are runners with microphones. There's a red microphone, a blue microphone, a green microphone.
And I see
If you have
lots
a
of
question,
hands.
raise your hand. Wait for the microphone to come to you. When it does come to you and I point at you, stand up. Tell us your name.
Here's the green mic.
Tell us if you're a member and ask a question. So let's start over here with the blue microphone.
I'm Jim McCormick, and I'm a member, and I'm curious how our experience over the past two decades with the Millennium Goals maps into your view of the world.
We also have these goals. The National Academy of Engineering has 10 major problems that it wants to solve, and the Millennium Goals, I actually don't remember what they were, but yes, there were some major, a lot of these could make a difference. Because these tend to be really big issues, and they're not going to be solved. Actually, part of the work we've done at UCSD, since we're interested in large social complex problems, is look at what it takes to solve them. And the answer is, you don't solve them. And the world's worst thing is to take one of these big problems and analyze it and say, I know the answer, and then start to implement it. So the city of London, the design people at the Royal College of Art, plus the Royal, I forget the engineering school that's across the street, some of you may remember. They got together and they were going to solve the ambulance problem, because ambulances were a real problem. They didn't get the people in time, and they did a careful analysis and said, well, the ambulances are in the wrong place. They're in the hospitals, and that's not where people need them. They need to be on the streets. So they designed a whole system where the ambulances would be stationed throughout the city, and but the ambulances needed different equipment. So they redesigned the ambulances, and they retrained the ambulance drivers and everybody. And they spent 3 or 4 years doing this. I even looked at the new ambulances I visited. And the mayor of the city of London loved it, and they won design prizes, and everybody clapped. And I went back and asked my friends 10 years later, so tell me how successful it's been. And they said, it never happened. Because when you have a big project like that, suddenly everybody says, well, I don't want the ambulance station near where I live. Or, ooh, that's going to require, the labor union said, no, that's going to change the whole structure that we have. It just doesn't work. So the way you have to do these things, it's called, there's a technical term, muddling through. There's a political scientist who years ago wrote a paper on incrementalism, and the journal editor said, that's a dull title. And he decided to call it Muddling Through, and it's therefore become a classic paper. In which he says what you need to do is, with these big problems, analyze them and figure out where you think the answer is, and then take a small step. Because a small step, nobody will object to. It's small. And if it succeeds, it makes it easier to do the next step. And if it fails, nobody notices. The Boston dig is a good example of what happens if you try to do the big one all at once. Complete uproar, and it went over its budget and way over schedule. And in the end, it's kind of neat, but it was a mess. So do it slowly. So therefore, the fact that a lot of the Millennium Goals, probably none of them have actually been solved, but they've made progress. And part of what I say is, suppose that we don't succeed in any one of the endeavors that we care about, what we leave people with is a tremendous amount of skills and knowledge to start working on their own problems by themselves. And that's what's going to be more important than the particular solutions we reach. By the way, I use questions as a way of giving small lectures, so
You got the green
apologize.
microphone somewhere?
Which color now?
Green.
Green.
David Rosen,
Life member.
PSW member. I have difficulty picturing this board. I tend to be concrete. I like to think of the small problem. Like this board, how you manage to put together these little things so that they put it together and they're automatically budgeting it. I would have liked to see a picture of it. And you had your lecturing technique, you put, okay, this may be part of your method. I at first thought it was, you actually put, you put the screen on and even had on the slide bar all the pictures you were going to, supposedly you were going to
No,
place.
that was me.
And then,
Those are my slides, not his.
oh, I see.
That will clarify things greatly, I'm sure.
I have stopped using slides because I found that slides trapped me. There they were, and if I see the audience yawning or didn't know that I can't change because the slides are there. And so many people use slides so they don't have to memorize their talk. The slides are their lecture notes, and they read them to you. Isn't that horrible? So I don't use slides. But the other problem, but there is cases where slides actually help, where I can give pictures and so on. But you can imagine this cardboard square. But what you're saying is, but come on, the shapes, they might be the wrong shape, and there's actually enough. How do you make it work? And you're right. It actually required some finagling and some details and some stuff, and it's worse than that because.
So you had to design that, not them.
Yeah, the experts had to help them do this because look, here's the buses and how much you're going to spend, and here's the bike lanes and how much you're going to spend, and here's the this and that. But you know what? If you put in the bus system, the bike lane would be cheaper. So we can make a smaller rectangle because you could use some of the same.
Hey, David.
You're right. But that's what. But the basic philosophy is what I said, and yeah, there are a lot of little details. So this took a period of 6 months for them to work on this. It isn't done overnight.
Other question somewhere? Blue microphone up here, and then, all right, green microphone over there. You've got your green microphone. It's in your hand. Stand up.
All right. Rick Hauer, not a member. Question for you. Do you have any comment on approaching large problems with the X-Prize type method, or have you considered including that in some way in what you're doing?
The tricorder project was done at UC San Diego. And actually, Eli Spencer, who's the physician who heads my health center, was one of the contestants. But it was overambitious and stopped. Eli still wants to do that tricorder. And we are talking to the X-Prize people about doing this. Yes. Prizes are actually a good way. Actually, I think it's DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, that have done a fantastic job of making challenges. They had challenges for machine translation of language, then they had a challenge for automated vehicles, and they actually advanced the state of the art of both of these topics dramatically because people all around the country, actually all around the world, rushed in to try to meet the challenge. And that was a really good, effective way. And part of the challenge, by the way, is that we have this challenge. Everybody is working to be the winner, but the winner then has to share the knowledge they've learned with everybody else. And next year's challenge, each of the people has learned from the previous. And that's one of the important parts of it. And we want the X-Prize to be the same thing.
So we have the blue microphone, then the red one, and then the green one. Blue, red, green.
Paul Albert, soon to be PSW member. I'm a fan of the vision that you're espousing, but I was wondering if you could comment on the same forces that democratize, also polarize, and the forces that can spread scientific knowledge can also spread unscientific knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you would have to put reality into this wonderful vision. But no, it is true that we're talking about people, and it's really difficult. It's well known that measles vaccination causes autism in children. It turns out to be false, but it's well known. And fluoride is poisonous, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're hard. These are hard issues to solve. But look, I don't try to tackle the easy ones. I try to tackle the important ones, and the important ones are always hard. And look, I also have this interesting background. I've been a successful business person. I have a background in engineering, 6 years of engineering study. I have a PhD in psychology, which means I understand business, I understand technology, and I understand people. And that's what's really required to put this together. And the hardest part of this is the people part. When it comes to automated vehicles, we're also working with Toyota and Ford, and we're now talking to Hyundai and another group of Toyota on automated vehicles. The hardest part is that last mile, if you will, where there's all the pedestrians and skateboarders and bicyclists. And if you actually go to China, where you have the motorcycles, they're all electric motorcycles now, so you can't even hear them. But they go any place. They go up on the sidewalks, they go ziggling around the cars, etc. That's the hard part. So you're right, absolutely, that there's a lot of theories are folk theories about behavior. And some of them are correct, or approximations, and some of them are absolutely wrong. And it's very difficult to change minds. But that's what we have to do.
Fred?
Yeah, hi. Graham, not a member. You talked a lot about meeting with the mayor and getting them to do some of these projects. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how you convince them to help citizens help themselves. And, is that like a top-down thing in local government, or what do local governments need to do, in some of your projects, and what were some of those experiences?
Actually, I can't answer the question in general. I can just say that we were very fortunate that we have really good relationships with the mayor of San Diego, with the Port Authority of San Diego. In fact, they came to us originally. And the Port Authority doesn't run boats. They do. There's lots of cruise ships. But it turns out they mostly own land on all the cities that go around the bay. And so they're worried a lot about the way that people are living and what they can do effectively with the land. And so they've come to us. And the city of Chula Vista has come and asked if they offered their city streets as a test ground for a lot of the things we're doing. So the problem has been just the opposite. It hasn't been that we've had to convince the city to help us. The problem has been they come to us too often for help, and it sort of swamped us, so we can't deal with all of the requests. It's also the case that the university is kind of strange because it's built 20 miles north of the center of the city in the most expensive area of the city called La Jolla. And that kind of isolates us from the real world. And there's a trolley line that's finally coming up that will come from downtown San Diego, actually from the border, from Tijuana, all the way up. And the first stop is going to be at the university where our building is going to be, the Design and Innovation Center. And we have another building that we are building downtown at the trolley stop. And that will actually allow us to do more things downtown. It'll be easier for people to go back and forth, and we'll be much more closely related to the community. So we've been fortunate. The relationships with the community are really excellent. I've also been in Evanston and Ann Arbor and Cambridge, where the relationships with the city are antagonistic and not nearly as friendly.
Thank you.
Green?
Timothy Thomas. I am a member of the society. My daughter started 12 years ago to try to save a rainforest in Borneo. Turned out to be that's a fairly difficult problem because there are many drivers to deforestation. She used a technique called radical listening, in which she initially had thousands of hours of consulting with all the people, and it discovered that they actually knew what they needed to stop this behavior, and they wanted to. They liked their environment the way it was. So one of the key elements was, what are you as the villagers here going to give for what you're asking us to give you? And what they wanted was primarily health care. You were cutting trees to pay for health care. Alternative agricultural methods, which they need expertise for, animal husbandry, various kinds of health behaviors. So the key element is, this is not a free deal here. You have to give us something if you want the first world to come here and give you something. So she was able, through a process of education, to convince them that this carbon sink and this forest and these animals matter to Americans. And if you give them this forest, they will give you organic farming training. And when it was all done, she meets, and it's not done yet, but it's close. She meets a lady on the street who says, Kinnary, my daughter's name, we did a good job on this system. We really did. It wasn't her system. It was the people's system. And we pay for it. Could you see that forest? I'm out. My question is, in your Appalachia thing, what are they going to pay for this? If they're not paying for it, it's not working.
First of all, that's a wonderful addition to my lecture. Thank you. Second of all, can we hire your daughter?
She's fully occupied.
And third of all, you're absolutely right. These are the kinds of issues we're going to find in Appalachia. We're just beginning. We're going in gently. And we're very concerned that we're the outsiders coming in. But we are working with the University of Kentucky Cancer Center and the people there who have frequently gone in. So we're doing this gently. Right now, the only people we've sent are our anthropologists who are really good at melding and managing and living with the people. But you're absolutely right. These are the issues.
It's a true story. Kinnary is a force of nature. And if you ever have a chance to meet her, I highly recommend it. She's quite an amazing person. Any other questions out there? We got a couple back here. Okay, pointing a red microphone, and then over on the right, is that a blue or a green? It's a blue.
Hi.
Red, blue.
Red.
Hello, I'm a member. I'm Adarsh Deepak, and I have a question. We started continuation of our conversation before the dinner, and that is, I'm interested in following up with C.P. Snow, 60 years ago, mentioned two culture theories, that scientists and technology and art people don't talk to each other. So by putting together, I've been trying to get A into STEAM. And the question that I have is, what are the elements of creativity as opposed to innovation?
Well,
I'm trying to distinguish the two.
First of all, C.P. Snow was wrong.
All right. Okay, thank you for correcting me after all this time.
Second, creativity is sort of the ideas. Innovation is not the idea. Innovation is actually the implementation. And in many cases, the implementation is the hard part. It's hard to convince people of this. The new graduate students, you tell them the ideas are the easy part. Getting it done is what's hard, and that's the implementation part, and that's the innovation part. I believe that in my lab, we bring people across from the whole university, and we have people from theater, we have people from visual arts, we have people from music, we have people from Fab Lab, we have people from mechanical engineering and bioengineering and computer science and electrical engineering and anthropology and sociology and psychology and cognitive. I don't see any problem. Where you give them interesting problems and they all have these wonderful, wonderful things they can do. And I just don't see that problem. And C.P. Snow was talking about, first of all, it was a long time ago, but second of all, it was the strange culture of high-class England.
Thank you.
No lawyers?
Hi, I'm Pim Her. I am not a member. I'm actually a designer, but I'm so excited to have you here in DC. I feel like sometimes, from the design perspective, there's Silicon Valley and then there's the rest of the world when you think about the design community. And I'm just very curious, especially for the designers in the room and especially for the ones who aren't in the room, you know, what are the questions we as designers should be asking and thinking about, you know, are we solving the right problems in the first place? And I will say, you know, if you want to make it a little more specific for DC, a lot of designers, I'm not one of them, but a lot of them work for the government, let's say, and they're trying to solve these huge problems like you're saying. So, you know, what should we be thinking about in terms of frameworks and just whatever you have in mind? I'd just be really curious to hear more of your thoughts about that. Thank you.
A lot of designers, in my opinion, are doing... There's a famous book in design by Papernak. He was a famous designer, and he starts off the book by saying, there may be some professions more dangerous than design, but I don't think so, basically. Because what designers often do, they're like, basically, I'm going to get more money out of you. I'm going to take the latest device that you have and I'll make a new one. And I'll make it fancier, and I'll make things that are obsolete in 2 years. And basically, they aren't serving any real purpose. They're not making the world a better place. They may make your life a little bit easier, but they also make the world a worse place because of the problem of disposal of all of these things. And so what I would like to be able to do is more designers to think the large picture. Designers don't often think big. By the way, that's true of every profession. Most profession thinks about the problems that face them, the small problems. I talk to engineers all the time. They very seldom think about the way it's going to be deployed and then think higher about the impact on society of what they are doing. And that's true of designers. And designers often complain they don't have any power. Well, they don't. But that's because they think small. In the 1920s, there were designers who thought big. When Bell Geddes was asked by a scale factory to redesign their scale, he said, okay. And he went and he looked to see how scales were being used in those days. And he said, okay, I can redesign your scale, but you're making them wrong. So first I have to redesign your factory and change the way that we're doing things. And when he was asked by General Motors to put up a small exhibit in the new World's Fair that was coming into New York, it was going to be an exhibit roughly the size of this room. And he said, okay, but actually I'd like to have an exhibit that shows what the future might be. And, well, it wouldn't fit in this room. And before he was finished, he actually built an entire building to house this wonderful exhibit. Some of you may remember it. You're nodding your head as if you do. You have to be about my age to remember it. I'm 80. So if you're younger, you may not. But it changed the entire World's Fair and was a very important display of actually what automobiles might do to the city. And it wasn't always good. Because pretty soon, when we invented the automobile, people say when we do inventions, we should think of all the negative consequences. Nobody could imagine the negative consequences of the automobile. In fact, the main goal, wow, it'll reduce pollution in cities. Because the cities were covered with horse shit. They thought it was used for transportation. And literally, there were feet. We could be really deep. You had to shovel it out every night. And this would reduce it, and it did. And nobody imagined that it would be as successful as it was, and that pretty soon you had to pave over vast parts of the country to house the automobiles, and that they in turn would cause more pollution. But we do need to think big about these things, at least try to anticipate as much as we can. And I don't think designers or engineers or most people are thinking big enough about the problems. Public health is an example. We are really good at solving a problem after it's happened. After the New Orleans is flooded, we go back and we try to fix it. But we're not good at trying to prevent the flooding in the first place. Public health is preventing disease. The problem with public health, if you're successful, there's nothing to see. Whereas if somebody has an infectious disease and I cure them, hurrah, everybody is happy. But public health could have prevented the person from having it in the first place. We need to think bigger, longer term. That's what I urge everybody to do, not just the designers.
So I think we'll take 2 more questions. There's one in the back there. Okay, blue microphone. No, not you, Bob. Not yet.
Lou?
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. Hi, my name is Jeffrey Yip. I am not a member. And you've mentioned about public health. You've mentioned that campaigns to reduce smoking rates have been very successful due to messaging. Could you expand on that point?
Do I really have to? I mean, you probably all lived through. Messaging is really complex, right? Because the cigarette package says, if you smoke this, you will die. And it has 0 effect. So the messaging had to be much more sophisticated and more complex. And part of the messaging was also to take the non-smokers and make them into a positive force. to say, hey, you know, you don't smoke, but you breathe the smoke of other people, and that secondhand smoke is just as dangerous. And so the messaging is a very complex and sophisticated attempt. But no, I can't go through the details. The truth is, I don't remember them.
Okay, we got, is that blue, green? Okay, Bob, question?
Bob Hershey, I'm a member. To what extent have you been able to get agreement on the objectives of the programs and the weights of the objectives and get an economic consensus to put the project together?
We are in the
Does internet
process.
help in that?
We are in the process of doing that. We have a group of extremely high-level people in the university who are trying to formulate this. Our goal is to be able to write it down in 2 pages. Because the point is, the kind of people we need to reach, not going to read more than 2 pages. And actually, one of the big funders has said, if you can't write it and get me excited in 2 pages, then it means you don't have the idea yet. And so that's our first step. We've only been at this a few months. A lot of the work you've been doing for years, and other people around the world have been doing, but us trying to put this as a major program, just a few months. But we're reaching the end now where we're about ready to go off to some major funding, and maybe also UCSD is in the middle of a fundraising program right now, trying to raise $2 billion. I think we've raised 1.5 already, and this will be part of that. So this is a major dream, and we are in the process of actually, this is the first public statement, by the way, of it. And so we have to actually get this out in ways more than just this, but it's, well, you get the idea. But you're right. That's what we'd like to do, because this is a big enterprise, and it's going to be an exciting one and an important one.
Okay, green microphone up here.
Hey, sir, Collier Crouch, I'm a member. So one of the things, I absolutely love the idea of democratizing design. But what I've found, I've tried to implement some of this stuff before and some of the things I've designed. But what I've dealt with are systems that have already in place. And so when you're trying to do a major redesign of a system that's already there, I have not been able to find the funding or the ability to convince people, hey, we have to, you know, expand our funding so that we can go through the processes to redesign things and actually get these funded, because you're talking about systems that are already been in place that you want to radically change, and you just can't find funding for them because they're working and you have a life cycle that it's already planned to. So how do you see the ability to basically change things rapidly and expand these major programs without funding and getting stakeholders behind it? Because it comes down to money, right? But I don't think we have that groundswell to convince the people that are paying for a lot of things to make major changes.
We have to choose the opportunities. Remember, I talked about muddling through. You're absolutely right. What's called legacy systems, the existing systems, are often incredibly expensive because they've been built over a period of decades, and you just can't go in and change them. Not only is it incredibly expensive, but take a look at what's happening in New York City, where they're now trying not even to do a new thing, but just repair the existing subway system. But it is putting huge inconveniences on people because major subway lines are now going to be out of commission for a year or two. And so you just can't rush in and do that. And some problems that are big legacy issues that are going to be very expensive to tackle, we just will say we can't tackle it. But believe me, there are enough problems, the crumbling infrastructure and the water systems, which are now not only leaking and causing damage because of sinkholes, but they're also going to cause diseases, because we really rely on the clean water. And if the water pipes leak, then water pipes have to always be pressured slightly over pressure so that they leak out, don't leak in. If they start leaking in, then disease comes in. And so those are the things that we can attack. We can attack the things that are emergencies today. And there's enough of them to keep us busy. But you're right. again, the most difficult problem is the people problem, and the people problem is associated with the political issue, and I mean politics in the good sense of politics, because what the good part of politics is people with different opinions and often different priorities do have to manage the real problems that are there within a reasonable budget, because the budget is determined by what people are willing to pay. So it's a complex sociotechnical system.
Red microphone, Bruce.
My name is Bruce Muri. I'm a member. Is anybody working on the problem of the explosion of the human population on Earth and how we might perhaps thin the herd or at least keep it at some sustainable level?
Many people. And one of the issues is economics and the distribution of wealth, or more importantly, poverty across the world. Because one of the reasons for the expanding population is high incidence of child death. And so it's felt that you need to have more children to get enough left to survive, to keep you going. And so in general, if you look at the populations in the world, as they get better health and as the income rises, the population decreases. So it's one of these issues where, look, almost nothing has a single cause. Almost everything has multiple causes, and you can't just say this is the reason for something. You have to say all of these factors are impinging. So one of the ways to try to worry about and be concerned about overpopulation of certain areas is to try to improve the life of people in those areas.
Okay, I think we'll have one more question in the back there.
Hello, thank you for your talk. As an engineering student, my name is Chris, not yet a member, but it was really awesome and insightful, so thank you. But my question is, how do you address or approach problems that are away from people, that are kind of out of sight, out of mind, where, you know, like there's tons of pollution in the oceans, and it's hard for people to care about that issue because they can't see it, even though it does affect them to some level?
We try to make them visible. I'm serious. We try to make them visible, and we can do that. Fortunately, the worldwide communication media now makes that easier, so that people can actually experience the dying of fish. And actually, we're going to have a problem with fish. Fish is becoming more and more popular to eat, and there's less and less fish, and a lot of the fish is no longer healthy. And so, but a lot of that is also caused by the kind of pollution you're talking about. But pollution is a major issue, not just in the ocean, it's also on the land, the landfill problem. And for that matter, you could argue in space. A lot of objects up there, and we haven't yet had a major calamity as a new rocket going up hits something in space, but that will happen. Have you had talks of that yet?
We're going to have a talk on CubeSats in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah. So, again, I believe the way you try to attack problems that are invisible is to make them visible. That may require a tremendous amount of creativity and innovation, but I think you can do it.
Well, thank you very much. Before you go,
thank you.
Let me present you with this framed announcement of your lecture and a signed copy of Volume 1 of the Bulletin of the Philosophical Society of Washington.
From 1871.
PSW is the Philosophical Society of Washington, updated. And Volume 1 is interesting because it has the names of all the founders, and it explains the reason for founding the society and why. At that time it was called philosophical, but that meant natural philosophy, and it actually meant science.
Thank you.
Before we go, we have a few closing announcements, and then we will adjourn to the much-desired social hour. If you're not a member, please join. It's easy enough to do. You can go on our website and look on the left-hand side and go down to the membership button. And if you touch the membership button, it'll pull up this application for membership, believe it or not. You fill out the application for membership and go to the bottom and press submit form, and you pull up the payment screen, and you can pay with any credit card of your choice as long as it's one of the 4 major credit cards, and you don't have to use PayPal. And if we decide that you're not eligible for membership, we will return the money, but that's pretty rare. So as long as you really have an interest in science, we're happy to have you as a member, and I encourage you to join. And remember that PSW is a nonprofit educational organization and tax exempt under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, and contributions are tax deductible. Our next lecture, and the 2,392nd meeting of the Society will take place on April 20th, right here in the Powell Auditorium. The speaker will be Yuval Grossman, Professor of Physics at Cornell University. He will be speaking on antimatter, in particular on why there doesn't seem to be any of it anywhere. I should mention that Yuval is a good friend and colleague of 2 previous speakers, Nima Arkani Hamed and David Kaplan. And he comes to us highly recommended by Nima. They were office mates at Stanford back in the day. And if you like Nima's talk, which was viewed by 40,000, well, it was viewed 40,000 times plus on YouTube before YouTube took our site down for unknown reasons, you'll very likely to like Yuval's talk as well. If there are any experts on YouTube or people who have contacts inside YouTube, please see me immediately after we adjourn. The rest of the spring schedule is posted on the website, and I'm afraid we're coming to the end of the year. On May 4th, we'll have Tomas Budavari, a professor of applied mathematics and statistics at Johns Hopkins, and he works on integrating very large independently developed data sets, including astronomical data sets, but the topic of this talk will be applying the same statistical and computational methods that he used for astronomy to the integration, analysis, and use of city data sets, such as water use, electrical consumption, road repair, demographic data, and the like, to develop more accurate and complete understanding of land use patterns and to guide policy formation and implementation in Baltimore, especially regarding the disuse and abandonment of housing. And finally, tentatively, on May 18th, we are working to put together our special panel on Cassini-Huygens, and this is going to happen. It's not clear if it's going to be May 18th or it might be a date in June. We have 3 speakers lined up so far, and we're trying to put this whole panel together, and I think it'll be very spectacular, especially visually, because Cassini returned pictures from the Saturn system that are unparalleled in their fidelity, in their, well, they're great. Okay, so. The social hour ends at 10:30, after which many of us go across the street. And we used to be in the Fairfax Lounge, but that's being revitalized, so we're in the lobby of the Fairfax Hotel, which is just across Mass Avenue. And if you would like to join us, please speak with Corresponding Secretary Robin Taylor. If James is here, our recording secretary, James Heelan, or me. And with that, please use the side entrance to exit the building, and I will now accept a motion for adjournment of the 2,391st meeting of the Society to the Social Hour. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The meeting is adjourned to the social hour.